Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi, I am Michael
Hey,
Forrester, and I hope everyone's here for an exam cram. Is that what we're here for? A little exam prep, little exam
Yes.
study?
yes,
Awesome. Okay. Just to check, I believe that all of you work for Booz Allen Hamilton. Is that correct? Awesome.
Yes.
yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. Do a lot of work for Booz, so just making sure I'm in the right place. There are many Zoom options to choose from on this side. Good. And then this is for Solutions Architect Associate.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
good. Well, you're in luck because I actually work for Amazon and I write the questions for SAA. So for the
Nice.
Solutions Architect Associate. So while I can't tell you what the questions are, just know that you are getting advice directly from the guy who works with like 4 or 5 other people to write the questions on the exam. And I actually just got done about 30 minutes ago looking at the bank. So while I cannot tell you what it says, there's some recency here. So, okay. All right. So first of all, let me just check. How many of you have taken the Architecting on AWS course?
I have.
D?
Oh, I have
Rajiv,
to.
Charles, Jennifer. Okay, good. Jennifer.
I have as well.
Yeah, I have.
All right, perfect. So all of you taking it. Good. Okay. Did your instructor? Oh, hey, my fingernails. Sorry, I dressed up as a Wonder Twin for Halloween, so I guess still have purple fingernails. Just call
Nice.
myself. Yeah, it was good. My girlfriend and I were dressed up. She was Jaina. I was the eagle guy. If you anyone remember the Super Friends? Anyway.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
do.
God, so long ago. It was old even when I was young. So question for you then is that did your instructor tell you that the class would only get you about 60 or 80% of the material you needed to pass class, to pass the certification?
I don't recall that part.
Okay,
No.
good, because I want to tell you that certification at AWS and training at AWS are almost separate companies. So they don't tell you this, but the classes only get you 60 to 80% of the material you need to pass the exam. Now, don't be daunted. 60 to 80% is a lot, but I'm going to give you a method that we've used at Booz Allen that has allowed us to set record, like eye-opening pass rates for Booz Allen employees. Like even AWS was like, wow. So the last time we did this, we had an 81% pass rate, which you might think 81%, that's horrible, Michael. That's like 4 out of 5. Yeah, well, not everybody's actually prepared to take the exam or do the work. But for everybody who did what we recommended that you're going to hear today, and this is going to be recorded, so I'll turn on recording in a second. It's not already on. What will happen is that you'll get this recording, but everyone who's followed the process that we lay out, everyone who's done it thus far, it's not a guarantee, but everyone who's done it thus far has passed the exam. So don't be daunted that if I told you 60, 80% you got in the class, but you need an extra 20 to 40% in order to pass the exam. We're going to show you today how to pass the exam using a very simple step-by-step method. Okay. All right. So before I go into my whole thing about, what to do and all the specific steps, does anyone have any questions about anything they learned either in class or anything questions about the certification before I go through it in general? Any burning questions?
I have a question that's not about a specific topic, but I was looking for reference material where I didn't have to watch a video, where I could just go through slides or go through content. And I wasn't finding it easily. So, is there anything that you recommend?
Content where you didn't have to basically where you would read it instead of having to.
Yeah, where I can go, oh, I mean, I guess I could just Google it.
Nope.
But so for instance, my notes don't necessarily tell me all the things that we're going through, and I want to figure out where in the video it was. So if I could just, maybe there, I don't know. I thought there was more content, but the actual class that we took looks like it's been superseded by other ones, because the test changed. I'm not really sure.
All right, well, let's go take a look. First of all, if you took the class, you probably have access to Vital Source Bookshelf, which is where all of the class notes are. And stop me at any time if I'm going in the wrong direction. But this is the Architecting on AWS class. I think this is one of the older ones. Let's go back and look at a new one, actually.
Yeah, I don't, and if anybody else knows, please pipe up maybe. So we got, there was a third provider that provided the class to us.
Was it WebAge Solutions?
Yes, it was WebAge, but I don't remember that, what you just said.
Ah, okay. So yeah, so you should have gotten access in class to a link that would have given you access to the course content. In this case, architecting on AWS, not advanced architecting. So in this, and you're going to see a bunch of stuff here because I'm an instructor for AWS, right? Is that these are all instructor guides, but you should have gotten access to the student guide, and the student guide should have given you a link like this, and it was like gilmoreglobal.ca or gilmore.ca, I believe is the URL.
That
So
sounds familiar.
yeah, you should have gotten an email and it says you now have access with this key to the content that you're actually seeing on your screen right now, which would have given you all of the modules, all of the slides that you saw in class, including all of the speaker notes, which, you know, a good instructor honestly isn't going to read off the slides and read every instructor note. They're going to teach, you know, to the students. And so everything that you covered in the course should show up. And actually, I
Okay.
realize I'm not showing the right screen. Should show up under, like, it should look like this. So this should have given you, and this was, I did bookshelf.vitalsource.com, but I think it's Gilmore Global, not Gilmore Girls, global.ca. I think it was Canada. Nope, I don't want careers. I just want CA. Yeah, gilmoreglobal.com, and I believe you would have gotten an email from this like domain name, and it would have basically put you there. If you don't have it, email support@webagesolutions.com, and they will make sure that you have access to it. So,
Okay.
and that's something they should have talked about in class, is that it will give you access to this virtual book, which you can actually print out as a PDF. So
Okay, this is awesome. Yeah, I thought I had something, but then I just went through the different, you know, we had like a virtual classroom and stuff like that, and I wasn't finding it easily. So, and I definitely didn't look in my email for a link. Somebody's in chat. Somebody else said they didn't get it either. Okay.
yeah, we'll tell you what. Let me see if I can print this out, because sometimes this fails. If I can, I'll just print it out to a PDF and just give it to you. This content is freely available to people who have taken the
Okay.
course. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
yeah, and if not, email support at WebAge Solutions, and they'll give you access. You should have gotten access to a student portal at WebAge, which has a bunch of documents on it, a lot of which we're going to talk about today. So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Here's the bottom line: if you don't have access to any of that, this thing that we're going to do today is going to be super useful to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into that, and hopefully this will also answer any future questions.
Thank
But I'm
you.
gonna just let this run in the background. Okay, so first of all, let's frame this up. I'm just gonna take a second. Let's talk about AWS certification, and I'm not here to sell you on it. I'm just here to tell you the technical details. That's it. Okay. You know that boos love certifications because it allows them to validate themselves easily to clients. It also, in a way, allows them to validate that you have, you know, some of the requisite skill necessary to actually use the thing in question. But let's talk about the certifications. So, as you well know, the AWS certifications start with Cloud Practitioner, and then you all are looking at Solutions Architect Associate. So the Solutions Architect Associate exam, hopefully you've been told this, is kind of an intermediate level exam, and I don't want to minimize it, but it is a trivia exam. There's no labs. So systems operations is the only one that has any hands-on labs. This one is a multiple right answer, multiple response. So you get to choose either one answer or you can choose multiple answers. So they do recommend that you have at least a year of production experience with AWS, because you're going to need to they're going to assume that you know things, everything that you should have known in Cloud Practitioner. They're going to assume that you know. They're going to assume you know what EC2 is, ECS, EKS, VPCs, S3. If I throw those words out and you don't know what they are, you probably want to go back and study for Cloud Practitioner, because they're going to assume that you know what the services are. Now, that being said, notice that this is a 130-minute exam, and it has 65 questions. So if you do the math, just know that you only have about 2 minutes plus for each question. You don't have 3, you got 2. So the reason I'm going to have you take practice exams, which I believe WebAge provided to you, is that correct? You all should have access to that?
Yes.
Good. I want you to know that we're going to go through how to get you the skills, the experience, and the expertise to pass the exam. And arguably after you do that, you have to do the practice exams, because that's the litmus test that tells you whether or not you're actually ready to take the exam. Now, for all of you, are you under deadlines to take the exam? And if so, when are those deadlines?
It was 90 days from the time that you completed the training, but it looks like they're relaxing that a little bit, but I have my exam scheduled for Thursday.
Thursday. Okay. Wait, was that D talking?
Yes, it was
You're
the,
there, right? Okay, D. All right. So, all right, D. So then remind me that you said that, because you're going to follow a slightly different path if you're going to take the exam.
I don't, it's okay if if I can always reschedule my exam for a little later. That's
I would
fine.
recommend that.
Yeah.
I would push it out to as far as you can, but no more than, I would say, 5 weeks.
Okay.
I would go out a month if you can.
Okay.
And that'll be very clear as to why by the time we get to the end.
Okay.
So notice it says Pearson View and PSI. Please just take it with Pearson View. PSI is being phased out. That's public knowledge. So you can see that on the blog site. Oh yeah, it actually says last time through PSI is September 1st, but I would avoid that if you can. They're kind of already ramping themselves off. Exam pricing should be handled for you if you have a voucher. I'm going to show you where to put that voucher if you haven't already done it. Sounds like D already has. But the other thing that's really important about this page is not just that it has specific information about the general exam and the details, but it has the exam guide. And I gotta tell you, the exam guide is probably like the first document you look at when you're preparing for any of the certifications. I'm gonna post this in chat. By the way, just know that you can click the 3 little dots next to the chat, like in the chat window, if you're not on the web interface, and you can actually download the chat directly. So you can get all the links and everything that I'm talking about. You can save them directly to your hard drive in a text file. So just know at the end, you probably want to do that. And I will remind you before we close the meeting. So this is version 3 of the exam, not version 2. Version 2, I think, retired back in July. Again, 65 questions. 50 of these are actually affect your score, and 15 of them are unscored. Does that matter? No, you're not going to know which one of them are unscored. But here's the important thing. If you start getting questions about machine learning and you're like, this is nowhere anywhere in the practice exams or in the exam guide, just know that they might be, they being us, because I work for AWS, might be messing with you. So sometimes when we get questions, we'll put them into the pool just to see if candidates do know them. And if a bunch of people get them right, then we know they should be there. So just know you're not going to know which questions are unscored or scored. So just treat the whole test as serious. But if you start, like I took the machine learning exam in January of this year. Was it January? That was like a lifetime ago. I took the machine learning exam and I got 4 questions on a service I'd never heard of in my entire life. I've been doing this for 12 years. I work for AWS. Doesn't mean I know everything, but should know this. And I found out later those were all unscored questions I was asked, but it took the wind completely out of my sails. I thought I'd failed the machine learning exam, and I passed by a higher margin than other areas in which I'm actually a deeper expert. So don't let all of a sudden a bunch of odd questions about services you don't know throw you off. Just know that some of this is unscored, but treat it all very serious. So 65 questions, you get 130 minutes. Multiple choice, multiple response, which means you choose one correct answer and there's 3 incorrect responses, or there's 2 or 3 correct responses and you have 5 or 6 total responses you could choose from. Obviously 3 of them are wrong. So this is pass fail. Usually the minimum passing score is 720. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. It's usually around 720. Most of the time, you're going to know right away as soon as you hit submit whether you passed or failed. Occasionally, if they detect something squirrely going on or they have questions, they'll defer your results for a couple days. Usually within about 2 business days, you're going to get an email that says you passed or failed, and you can then go and look at your score. I'll show you where to do that. Here are the things they're going to ask you about: security, resiliency, high performing, and cost optimized architectures. They're going to ask you basically anything related to architectures and those general domains. If you want to know the specifics, here you go. This is why we start with this exam guide document. You, at a minimum, should skim this knowledge and skills areas, including the task statements, right? Which are actually at the top. And if you don't know, this is actually called IAM Identity Center now. It's no longer even single sign-on. So Anyway, if you don't know what those terms are, you're gonna need to go find out what they mean. What's the shared responsibility model? Hopefully you've already seen that from class, right? Do you know, everyone should know what multi-factor or two-factor is. Do you know what the secure token service is? Do you remember that from class? So you want to make sure you at least skim this and note the things that you don't know anything about. Because if you don't know anything about them, you could be asked questions about them. But remember, this is the associate's exam, so it's not going to go super deep. It's just going to go kind of superficial to just above intermediate. But if you don't know what DDoS is or SQL injection, you want to write that down. So first, step number 1, get the exam guide, skim it, figure out what the things that you don't know. You don't know what direct connect is? Hopefully you do, because you got exposed to it. You don't know what key management is. You don't know what certificate manager is. You do, you don't. Figure all that out. If you don't know what event-driven architectures are and where they're applied, it's not like you need to know how to apply it at a deep level, but you at least need to know what event-driven architectures are and why they would basically, why does AWS care? Well, it's because most serverless architectures are event-driven. So, things like Fargate, by the way, is not a standalone service. It's part of ECS and EKS. You gotta know like what those things are in general. Now, it's a pretty long document, but skimming it wouldn't take but a few minutes. For example, do you understand what RDS proxy is? You would write all this down, highlight it if you want to download the PDF and do your own kind of mock-up. The other thing you want to do is that once you get past all the domains and the general things they're going to ask you about the domains, which by the way can seem daunting, but don't let it daunt you, because I'm going to show you how to scope this down. This is just for you to pick out keywords for services and ideas that you don't understand. This is actually one of the easiest things to do. But don't let the whole like, oh my God, are they going to ask these jobs? No, don't worry about that. Okay, I'm gonna scope you down. It's gonna be good. But use this step 1, go through this and figure out what it is, the terms and whatnot, concepts that you've never seen before. Make a list, go figure out what those terms and concepts are. That's step 1. Okay. You also, by the way, want to come in here and know which services, they used to have this at the end, but I think they updated it, are not going to be on the exam. See this? See this where it says not on the exam? So they're not going to ask you any questions that aren't related to core services. So they're not going to ask you, for example, about VMware. They're not going to ask you about third-party products. That's the general thing you need to remember. They're not going to ask you about kind of fringe cases, like stuff that's developer. They're going to ask you about the code services. They're going to ask you about code build, code star, code artifact. They're not going to ask you that because that's all developer stuff. And this is architect. They're not going to ask you anything about IoT. The Internet of Things. You know why? Because that's IoT stuff. That's not architecture stuff. But we're like, what if you're an IoT architect? Well, then you're a different breed of architect. They're not going to ask you machine learning stuff. So this whole thing, forecast, look out for vision, look out for metrics. Who comes up with these names? Even working at AWS, I don't know who comes up with these things. Any of the management governance, like this is, chatbot and distro for open telemetry and and then any of the media services, and let's see, what else stood out? Really none of the like quantum technologies, none of the like satellite stuff, none of the ground, robotics. It's just going to stick with core services. Now you might be like, well, Michael, all you did was eliminate machine learning, IoT, and like the media elemental transcoding services and all the fringe stuff, like which is like robotics. That means everything else is still on the table. Yeah, kinda. But just know, by the time you finish this conversation with me in about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, which doesn't mean we're going to be done. It just means I'm going to be done reviewing all of this stuff, and then we're going to do some practice. You're going to know exactly how to scope yourself in. So step 1, download the exam guide, review everything in here, and make sure you know what it is as long as it's not on the out of scope page. So on the out of scope page, just know that like the developer stuff, the machine learning stuff, the transcoding stuff, that's out of scope. We're not going to be talking about that. No machine learning questions, no developer questions. You might get some quasi kind of operations questions, but for the most part, the answer is no. And no deep questions on security, deep questions on databases, none of that. Okay, so step 1, grab the exam guide, links in the chat, and go through this and make sure you know all the terms that are listed here, except for out of scope. Any questions about step 1?
Nope.
Okay. Interrupt me at any time. All this is, again, reminder, this is all being recorded. Okay, so step 2. So you know your exam, you've looked at the exam guide, you've figured out the basic concepts, but you still don't really know what you need to know to get ready for the exam. And you've already taken the class. So you've gotten like about 60 or 80% of the knowledge, but like what else is in scope? What other things, ideally, if I'm going to take Solutions Architect Associates, should I be looking at? Well, the exam guide gives you obviously a broad bucket of things you could look at, but what if we need something more specific? Well, one, you have a study guide inside of your portal. And actually, let me pull up the, is this right? Yeah. So this is an old one. You have an updated one. So just ignore this one for a second because the one you have is a little bit more modern. This is the original one that I developed, way back when. And notice that it has study material and the links will be updated and different in the one that you have, but it's going to have white papers. It's going to have labs in here. There's a bunch of really great study material in here. Here's the general rule of thumb. This is a map that will kind of let you know what to study to prepare for the exam. So this is kind of the expertise building, like how was the system designed? Inside of this is our labs. Now you may be saying, Michael, what kind of labs? Well, bear with me. So there's a link here to the well-architected labs, which is a public link that AWS makes available. So these are just publicly consumable labs, right? Excuse me, my mom was calling. Let's go ahead and shut her down. I'll call her later. Notice that if you're familiar with the well-architected framework, there are labs here for operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability, plus some things on the well-architected tool and whatnot, right? First of all, ignore sustainability. I know it's the new 6th pillar that came out last year, but no one tests on it, so just set that aside. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's not going to be relevant for certification. But operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization are all totally in scope as design principles. And if you may remember, if we go back and we look at wherever I stuck the guide, if we go back and look at the domains that were covered inside the exam, I know it's a lot of scrolling, just bear with me. Let's just go ahead and page up here. Notice that the domains are about security, resiliency, high performance, cost optimization. The only thing that's missing here is operational excellence. And you know why it's missing? Because it's more relevant for systems operations and DevOps engineering than it is for architecture. Don't get me wrong, still relevant, but not primary. Okay. So these labs are meant to supplement the expertise building that you're going to be building by like running these white papers and looking at these digital trainings. Now, let's say you look at this and you say, Michael, well, some of these links are broken. Is there another option for the study guide? Like if I like, I like WebAge's study guide, it's good. I helped design it, obviously, so I'm appreciative. I'm a fan of it. If I want to go a little deeper on the expertise size, which is step 2, is there another ramp up guide, right? So for example, you already have this guide in your student portal. AWS actually developed ramp up guides written by a bunch of us in collaboration with a bunch of other people. And so just notice, and I'm gonna put this link in here. This is a link to all the ramp up guides that are by role and by technology. So notice the solutions architect has a guide right here. And if I click on this guide, there is a much more detailed guide that you can use to do digital training, self-paced labs, whatnot. The only reason that we wrote our own is that how many of you have heard of AWS Skill Builder? Do we know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and I work for AWS, so, but I don't necessarily agree with this, but they came up with their own portal, kind of like Pluralsight and whatever for training. It was free for a while. And now some of the things now charge you. So the reason we came up with our own is that so you could get obviously access to free resources. But notice that some of these, like for example, I don't even know if this digital training is still free anymore. It is free actually still. You just have to sign in to Skill Builder. Yeah, log in. So some of these links most of these links are going to be free. Some of them are going to like ask you to get a subscription, right? But these ramp up guides are a little bit more comprehensive than the one that we gave you from WebAge. Okay. So just know also that this ramp up Solutions Architect ramp up guide will take you all the way to professional. But please talk to me if you're going to do pro. You're gonna have my email address by the end of this. Please email me if you decide to do pro, because this guide needs a little bit of work and I didn't write it. So, but there's some advanced curriculum here as far as going deeper. And you might ask yourself, okay, Michael, how much of this do I need to do? Because this looks like a lot of training. So notice that here is where you actually take the exam prep for a certified associate. Notice here is where you actually took the class, which you've already done. But notice that the prep for this is actually only probably amounts to like 20 hours worth of prep. But all of these options, section 1, monitoring and governance, section 2, serverless, section 3, containers, section 4, cost management, section 5, all of this will lead up to the associate exam. So it's a lot more training than what you have on your WebAge sheet, but this is a second option if you need to go a little deeper. If you are not working on a production project with AWS, I highly recommend that you use the ramp up guide. If you've worked with AWS already, which you're supposed to take the associate's exam, I recommend that you use the WebAge study guide, which should look something like this. Okay. So step 1, go get the exam guide, figure out what concepts you don't know. Step 2, get a map for building expertise by getting access to white papers, digital trainings, other things that are going to allow you to understand how AWS has designed these services to work. So all of these white papers, all these digital trainings, everything you saw in the ramp up guides over here, this is all to help build your understanding of how the system functions. That's step 2. Step 3 is to go and do the lab work. So you saw me earlier click on this lab link, which you have access to, and that took us over to the well-architected labs. This is where you build experience. If you have not touched AWS in production before, I highly recommend that you come in here and run a bunch of these 100 level labs. By the way, these labs will require you to create your own AWS account. Do not be afraid of that. Here's what you should be afraid of, because you all work for Booz Allen. Do not create a Booz Allen AWS account using your Booz Allen email address. They're going to send your manager an email. They're going to give you a phone call. And I just can tell you, I love security, but they're not going to be nice about it. And I don't know why, because it's not like anyone's doing it on purpose, right? It's just an accident. But just so you know, feel like emails are going to fly. No one's going to suffer in their career or whatever. But you just don't want that headache, right? So do not create an AWS account using your Booz Allen email address. You might say, well, what do I use then, Michael? You can use any Gmail address, any address you want to create, and know that you're probably going to spend about 25 cents a lab, 25 cents a lab, if you open your own account and you run these labs inside your account. That's it, a quarter. The only way you're going to spend more than that is if you start a lab and in the middle of it, you decide to walk away for 5 days. Then you're going to spend like $20 and you're going to be upset. Don't do that. So step 1, get the exam guide, review the concept. Step 2, get either the certification study guide from WebAge or use the AWS official ramp-up guides. Study all of the white papers and all the web pages that are listed in there. Step 3, go to well-architected labs, create your own AWS account, and then run the 100 level foundational labs, or even the 200 levels if you're ambitious, and run a few from each of the different pillars. You know, run a couple from non-operational excellence, but security in particular, reliability, do a couple of the 100 level labs. Actually, there's only one here. That's weird. They must have removed some. Here's 100 level labs with cost optimization, performance efficiency. So here's a couple of the 100 level labs with cost effectiveness. Okay. So are we clear? 1, exam guide. 2, either the certification study guide or the official AWS ramp-up guides. Study those. 3, get some lab work and do some projects. Any questions about those 3 steps thus far?
No.
Okay. Let me take this off and I'm going to post this URL in there.
You know, Michael, when I log into like the AWS skill builder, I do use my Booz Allen account because that's what they told us to do before.
Yeah. So I know this is going to sound weird, but Amazon accounts are different than AWS accounts. So it says log in with Amazon on that button.
It said like do the AWS partner
Ah,
partner one. Yeah.
good. Yeah. So if you have access to the partner logins, you can use the partner logins. Not everybody does actually at Booz. Most
Oh,
people do, but not everybody does.
okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me sign out really quick so I can show. So when you get here to this challenge, oh, did you just auto log me in? Oh, that's horrible. Anyway, it should pop up a little dialog box that says, log in with Amazon or log in through other ways, and then you can get to choose the partner login. So if you know that you have a partner login, because to be clear, Booz is a partner with AWS, but not everybody has the partner login enabled. You can log in that way, or you can just use your email address with AWS. Like you could use your personal email address. Personally, just to say this, I use my personal email address because while I don't plan on, leaving anytime soon, if I ever decide to leave, I can take all my stuff with me. And that includes your certification, by the way. Your degree page has an internal page on how to associate your personal address with your Workaday profiles, because I believe you guys are using Workaday, correct?
Workday, yeah.
Workday, thank you. You had a question, Dee?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So we talked about the exam, talked about getting expertise using the certification study guide, talked about building on that expertise by getting experience with hands-on labs. There's one other place that you can go to get experience with hands-on labs. So if you go to amazon.quicklabs.com, by the way, this changes all the time, which is probably why WebAge didn't give you a document on this. I mean, this must change like every couple months. It's kind of crazy. So this is amazon.quicklabs.com. Now here's, as a Booz employee, what you're going to love about this for step 3, for the experience building. So this is a hidden page run by a company called Quick Labs. Quick Labs is the official classroom lab provider for AWS. Oh, but except they're moving over to something called Skill Builder or Builder Labs, which most of you probably did when you did the class recently, right? So you didn't actually go to Quick Labs. But what's cool about this for Booz employees is that I'm going to sign in using my, oh, actually I might try that and see if that works, but I don't think it will. Yeah. Let's try this instead. If you sign in with your Booz Allen, oh, you did use Quick Labs in class, Jennifer? I wasn't sure if they had rolled over yet, because I think as of
We did in August, early August, we used it.
Yeah. So it's now rolled over to a new site. So which is it's now a different process. So if you still have your login, you probably used webage.quicklabs.com. Just so you know, webage.quicklabs.com is a different website than amazon.quicklabs.com. And so you can just create your own account here using your Booz Allen email address. And the minute you do that, just so you know, you will all of a sudden get credits for free underneath your account.
Yeah, because I have like 2,000 whatever credits.
Yes. Now, just so you know, those are shared. So you're going to see them go up and down, even though you haven't done anything. So anybody who logs in, you're going to see it go up and down, and it's totally fine. If you ever run out of credits, which you should never run out, just email support@webagesolutions.com and say, hey, I'm out of credits. And they'll usually get back to you within a couple hours and refresh it. But we have a notification system that lets WebAge know if this goes to 0. Now, obviously, I'm under my own account, so you won't see it. So good. It's good. I'm glad you have 2,000 credits. Now, here's the cool thing. This, for step 3, get using labs. This is a great place for you to go in and actually do hands-on labs, very similar to what you would do with the well-architected labs, except you're not going to use your own AWS account. This is all in a controlled environment. It's a little bit locked down, and it's got step-by-step processes, recipes for you to follow to build certain things. So let's say that Rajiv came to me and said, I'm really good at a bunch of things, but I haven't really done cross-region replication, right, with S3. So I would say, hey, we'll go out there on, Quick Labs and go find the one that has cross-region replication. And Rajiv would come out here. He would log in under amazon.quicklabs.com. If he didn't have an account, he would create one using his Booz Allen, his bah.com email. And by the way, that just goes quick. It doesn't trigger anything. It just does it. And then he would come here and he would click on Start Lab. And then what's going to happen is it's going to ask him, it's going to say, hey, do you want to spend some credits? And you just say yes to spending the credits. And then what will happen is that it's going to start building the lab on the left-hand side, and it will then give you an auto login to a dedicated AWS account that's only going to live for as long as this timer is not 0. So don't start a lab and then walk away from it and expect it to be here when you get back, because it's not. So for an hour and 30 minutes, Rajiv, if he did that, would have access to a dedicated AWS account that lives for the life of this lab, that he would log into through a browser, and he and I'm assuming him, would come down and basically start the lab, and then would basically start following the directions here. Go to the Start Lab section, go to the Lab Console, go to the Buckets page, create a bucket, and he would follow this process to understand how this functions. And then he would enable a versioning on the bucket, right, which is task 1.2. And then they would create a destination bucket and enable a version on that bucket in another region. And then enable cross-region replication on one bucket to the other bucket. And then you would put an object in that bucket, and then you would watch it replicate. And so you just follow the recipe. And these links on the right-hand side are quick links that will take you, like, to the different sections. For Booz Allen employees who take a class with WebAge, this is free. So you have unlimited access to all the labs. And you might say, well, that sounds cool, Michael. It is kind of cool, actually, because the labs are super complex out here. There's some really good ones, actually. Everything from DynamoDB to deploying Elasticache on Windows Server to there's I don't think there's an EKS lab, not anymore, but there is an ECS lab, if I remember correctly. So if you haven't touched the container service, you want to kick the tires on that, you don't want to spend the money on your own account, this is an option. Okay. And you can sort this out if you want to and say, look, I only want high level stuff, so just give me the advanced items, right? And you could just take the search out and see what comes up. Oh, this is where the EMR, the Elastic MapReduce service, and data access techniques. You could also say, you know what? I just want intermediate. How to encrypt, working with Redshift, CloudFormation, capacity sizing. So my point being is, if level 1 is grab the exam guide and understand the concepts, level 2 is go in and look at the program study guides and learn the system design. Level 3 is hands-on experience in labs. You can use well-architected labs with your own account, or you can use Quick Labs for this. And I'm kind of surprised AWS is moving off of this, because while they do have, sometimes they have challenges with like permission limitations and stuff like that, this is a really solid product and has been solid for them for about 6 or 7 years now. So just know this is an option. Okay. Any questions about step 1 with the exam guide, step 2 with the program study guides, or step 3 with either one of these lab options?
Nope. Good.
Good. Okay. Now, I'm just going to mention it just as an honorable mention. You can obviously always go to Skill Builder if you want to, and come out here and search for courses. Sometimes I have trouble finding the search option, but if you go to My Courses, it usually pop up. The search, by the way, is in this upper left-hand side. So if you need to dive in deeper to DynamoDB because you just haven't spent that much time with it, just know that there are options here. Oh, look at that. Courses under maintenance. So that's not going to work. Where are the rest? Oh, wait, these are enrollments. Let's actually just go to the Learner dashboard and search here. Here it is. You can apply filters, by the way, and say, look, can I get this only in English or Hindi or whatever it is, right? That you your primary language is. So notice this will be options. One thing that I wish they had is that I wish I could exclude things that are subscriptions. Oh, wait, maybe we can. Oh, they did add a free option. That wasn't there when I last looked. But you can go out apparently now and filter it out by free. So just know you can limit yourself to just the items that are free. So you have to buy a skill builder subscription. I don't know. I don't know if either, D, Jennifer, Rajiv, Charles, or Maruka Beatty. If Booz has access to skill builder, I don't think that's been generally announced to all of you, right?
Yeah, we can get to it. I've gotten to it. Yeah.
You have a paid subscription?
It's not, I don't think it's paid, but it's under my Booz account and I can search on all of these things. And I've actually taken a couple.
Okay. But I don't think they've given everybody a skill builder subscription yet. So all the free stuff should be accessible, but the pink stuff, which is the paid for stuff, is I don't think that you have company-wide access to it yet.
No, yeah, yeah, you would have to get a subscription for those, but there's some free stuff.
Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about, just for a few minutes, about the logistics of the exam before we go on to the fourth step, which is practice items, because that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, because we're going to play a Jeopardy style game. Well, not Jeopardy style, but it's like we're going to play a fun game for the remainder of our time together. All right, so let's go back to the exam. And let's just do certification again. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at any time. Ooh, you know what? I don't think I want to go that way, because I think that would show you not what I mean to show you. Let's go this. All right, so let's say you're here and you want to schedule your exam, which in general, it's going to take you 5 hours a week of additional study times 8, 40 hours to prepare for this exam. That's above and beyond the class. Okay, so the class is about 6.5 hours times 3, so 19.5, 20 hours, right? You're going to need 40 hours of additional study on average to prepare for the associate's level solutions architect exam. That's what we found is a pretty good average. The professional exams take about 60 hours. The specialty exams take about 80 hours of additional study. Cloud practitioners takes 20. So it's like 20, 40, 60, 80. It actually rolls out pretty cleanly. But for the solutions architect or associates exam, it's about 5 hours a week for 8 weeks to really get you ready. If you want to go faster, you want to put 10 hours in, you can do that. But when people like put that time in, that's where we get to the 80, 90% pass rate for students. Okay. Not a guarantee, but just letting you know that we've done this a lot. Thousands of Booz Allen students have taken this with us, and our pass rates are really high because of this process. So let's say you're here and you know that you have to take the exam by December 1st. So forget the 5 hours a week at 8 weeks. You've got 4 weeks, so you're gonna have to put in 10 hours. If you click on schedule an exam, it's going to take you to this interesting aws.training page. It's going to ask you to sign in. Now you can sign in using your Amazon account, and notice that it just kind of did it for me, because you saw me earlier just log in with my Amazon account, not my AWS account. Just to be clear, even though my AWS account uses itamazonian@gmail.com and my Amazon account uses itamazonian@gmail.com, they are actually separate login entities. So you won't get in trouble if you use your Amazon account. You will get in trouble if you try to create a Booz account on AWS using your Booz email. Okay. So I just logged in using my Amazon account, and so it's already kind of logged me in. Now, when I click here to this go to your account button, it's going to actually take me to an AWS branded page on a site called CertMetrics. So we just went from AWS, like AWS at Amazon.com, to AWS.training, to certmetrics.com. And notice here that there's a couple of notifications and there's a bunch of stuff at the top. Now, the only thing I'm really interested in is registering for an exam, which is that big yellow button over on the right-hand side. But I just want to point out that your profile's here, right? Any exams that I've registered for, I don't have any scheduled, right? Any exams that I've taken. So as you can see, kind of taken a lot of them, right? I think I've taken, I think there's only 3 that I don't have. And actually, they asked me they were, can you just get the rest of them by the end of the year? And I'm like, you make it sound so casual. Like you're just going to roll in there and get the networking certification and the security. We'll see. Anyway, here's all my achieved certifications. I believe all of which are still active. Database, machine learning.
How is that database one?
easier than you would think, actually. Yeah. But you really have to know the engines a little bit better than I thought you would. Like you have to know a little bit about the Oracle engine, a little bit about like the tools that you use for Oracle, the tools you use for, you have to know just a little bit.
Okay.
By the way, if you follow this process, this is the exact process that I use to pass that exam. So
Okay.
yeah, should definitely. By the way, the reason I want to show you the active achieve certifications is that this is where you can get your PDF certificates. Amazon also has digital badges through a site called Credly, which will show up on your LinkedIn profile. So just know that if you enable that, people can validate that you have the certification. You also get weird benefits, and don't worry about these codes. You can steal them from me if you want to, but none of them work. But you get a 50% discount the minute you take an exam with AWS. You get a 50% discount off your next exam. You might say, well, that's not a big deal. Well, if you're paying out of pocket, it is, because a $300 exam becomes $150. And just to say this, while you are going to expense this, they do like it, when it's cheaper. So, but
And so you're saying for this one, like this, when you sign up for the exam, you should use your personal, because I thought they had us use our Booz Allen one account.
and you can use whatever you want, like whatever they
Okay.
recommend is totally fine. Other people in the past at Booz have used their personal accounts.
Mhm.
If you do that, then there's a Degreed page. You have to search Degreed for it, that will allow you to associate your certification with a personal email to your Workaday profile.
Okay. Okay.
That's the only thing. That's the extra step. If you use your Booz Allen email address, it automatically associates.
Okay.
That's the only distinction, really.
Okay.
And know that you don't lose access. If you go to and I'm not advocating this, but if you happen to go to another company, you can change your email address. So it's not like you lose it.
Okay.
The other thing about exam history that's important for you to know is that once you take the exam and you pass it, they're going to send you an email that says you passed. If you want to see your score, you have to log into the CertMetrics site as if you're going to go take another exam. Go over to exam history and you have to download your score report. Now I haven't even looked. This could be embarrassing. It might be like a 700. Oh, look, I got an 823. I got a decent B on it, right? I did only have a few weeks to study for that, so I'm actually pretty proud of that score, honestly.
That's cool.
So, just know that if you want your score, this is where you get it. So, and oh, by the way, I was joking earlier about how I thought I'd failed the machine learning exam. So if I download the score report and take a look at it, notice that the score report here says this is an 836. And I think if I go back and look at DevOps Engineering Professional, which I'm supposed to be a specialist on, I think my score was worse. Yeah, it was an 806. I'm a specialist in DevOps, and I got an 806 on the exam.
I mean, when will those really matter? I mean, no one is going to ask you what your score number is, right? They only care if you pass.
No one asks. They're like, have you passed or not? Yeah. And besides, the exams are tough, so
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you'd be shocked. I just got off an exam review with a bunch of people off of SAA, and we have to argue down the difficulty of the exams because we're like, look, all you 10-year veterans of AWS, you're not the target candidate. Is the target candidate going to know the answer to this question? They're like, yeah, they should know everything about Oracle's data dump engine from the 1990s. I was like, no, they're not. No, they're not. No one's going to know that. That's like the 90s. Can we just move on? Anyway. So just know that there's a bunch of data and psychometrics and other stuff that goes into it to make the exams fair, but they are difficult. So you do have to study. So note, exam history is where you get your score. So if there's one thing you remember about this whole thing, remember, Michael said, if you want your score, you got to log in to the exam site and go to exam history, and you can download it there. Okay. Now, what's the other most important thing? What's the other reason we're here? Exam registration. So if you come here and you say, look, I want to take Solutions Architect Associates SAO3, just verifying the number. That's the 30th, good. And we want to schedule with Pearson View. All right, so here, this is very important. So please make sure you're paying attention for this one. First of all, if you're comfortable with it, my recommendation is please go take this at the testing center. I know you're like, but Michael, it's so convenient to take it at home. Wait for it. If you can, I would please say to you, just click on a testing center. Make sure you read all the stuff about personal items. And by the way, you have to bring 2 forms of ID if you go to a testing center. Just remember that. And you can find your place, and they'll do it based on address. And they're going to ask you, what written language would you prefer? SAA, by the way, is the most taken exam out of the entire pantheon of exams. So it has more languages available to it than any of the others. You do want to read all this, things like, hey, you got 24 hours to reschedule or cancel, et cetera, et cetera. You can reschedule twice before they're going to make you cancel it and rebook it. Notice it's got my address in here. So now you guys can swap me if you want to. And then down here, it's going to list all the test centers, which this is actually my favorite place because it's in a college campus. And man, there's some interesting cats down there. Anyway, it's also like 5 minutes away. So you go here and you choose your testing center, and then literally you just bring 2 forms of ID. I mean, I've walked in like flip-flops, you know, and like shorts and just like been like, hey, I'll take my exam. Here's my ID. And they're like, you go to town. It's super easy. They put you in a testing center. All the computing is taken care of. You don't have to worry about network connectivity. All that's done. If you decide that you're like, you know what? I don't know about that, Michael. Like, I think what I'd rather do is I'd kind of rather like figure this all out myself, right? And so I'm gonna go back to home here for a second. Register for exam. We're gonna go back this time and we're gonna choose schedule with Pearson VUE. And this time, instead of taking it at a testing center, you decide that you want to take it online. Notice that, by the way, your testing space is now popped up as an option. So just so you know, you can't have 2 monitors. At least you can't have 2 connected monitors. You can't have anything on your desk. You have to take pictures of all 4 sides of your desk, including the back side, from the back. So it can't be against a wall. You have to take pictures of the underside, right? You can't use your work laptop because you guys have a special thing called, is it NetScaler? What's that called? That
Descaler.
NetScaler.
Descaler.
Descaler.
Yeah, you have this fun little utility that likes to randomly block websites. So the recommendation is don't take it on your booze laptop. You can use a Mac, you can use Windows, you cannot use Linux, you can't use a Chromebook, you certainly can't use a pad. You just go grab somebody's laptop and use it. Otherwise, just go to a testing center, which I highly recommend. By the way, you're not going to be able to take a break. You're not going to be able to drink a glass of water. You can't do anything for the 130 minutes. You can't leave your desk. There's no bathroom breaks. If you're in a testing center, by the way, you could actually get a bathroom break if you wanted to. You might think, well, that's not a big deal. Well, wait till the exam's 180 minutes long and you just drink a bunch of coffee. Yeah, you probably want a break. So anyway, figure out which way works for you. If you're gonna do it from home, here's what I do. I take a laptop, I run a cable over to my dining room, I kick everybody out of the house, including the pets. Because if they hear stuff jangling in the background, they're going to interrupt you and say, hey, can you point your camera at what's making the noise? They are acoustically fingerprinting your room. So I don't want you to be afraid of online because I do it all the time. It's my preferred option, you know, when I don't want to drive out. But just know there's a little more hurdles to go through. So try to get a testing center if you can. If you can't, take it online. Just make sure that you've got a dedicated space for it. And please kick all the people out. I can't tell you how many times my son, my 15-year-old, has burst into the room and said, the answer is S3. And like, you know, the proctors think it's a joke at this point in time because they're like, you know, he needs to leave, sir. And, you know, but the first time he did it, I thought I was going to lose the exam because, you know, just get the family out. That's all I have to say. Now, that being said, when you go through this whole process of registering for the exam, you know, they're going to ask you like, what do you want your written language to be? Later on, they're going to ask you what your spoken language is. For some reason, it's only English and Japanese. So unless you Nihongo dekimasu ka, probably just stick with English. And then they're going to ask you about facial recognition and facial comparison and admission policies. And anyway, you're going to want to read all this. But basically, it says bring a significant form of ID. If you have an issue, contact support. We're going to send you a bunch of emails. Here's our reschedule or cancellation policy. Oh, and by the way, you cannot touch your face. You cannot speak out loud. There's no food or beverage hygiene products. You can have no electronic devices. You are not permitted to stand up or leave. You are not permitted to use scratch paper or take notes. Does that feel intimidating? Shouldn't be. You probably won't need it, honestly. But if you're in a testing center, by the way, they're a little more lax.
Yeah, so if you go to testing center, Are you able to bring paper or a bottle of water or anything like that in?
Typically, they won't let you bring water in, but they'll let you take a break if you like want to take it outside, and it varies by testing center.
Yeah,
Typically,
they
they'll
won't-
also let you bring in a like a dry erase notes, which you have to turn in when you're done. You can't keep it, obviously.
Okay,
But they'll let you have a dry erase little scratch pad, and you just either leave it at the desk or turn it in when you come in.
okay.
Someone was going to say something.
Yeah, they didn't let me bring anything in the testing center besides that dry erase board that they gave me that I had to, of course, turn back in.
Yeah, but you could step out to get water, right?
Oh yeah. Well, if you have to leave out.
Yeah, if you've got time.
If you feel like you got time. Remember, you got 2 minutes per question. And by the way, that
Right.
gets worse in the specialty exams. It's like instead of 2 minutes and 45, it's like 2 minutes 15 or something. Interesting. You think it would go up, but because it takes longer to read the larger questions in the specialty exam.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many times I was like this. Okay, Michael, let's see. We got to do this. And they're like, excuse me, Mr. Forrester, could you take your hands away? And then like the second or third time, he was like, sir, if you do that again, we're gonna have to shut down your exam. And I'm like,
And one of my guys, he talks to himself like or reads online, like reading the question, like his mouth's moving, and he did it twice, and they stopped the test. He had to go do it again.
they're nice, but they're firm,
Yeah,
and they do not negotiate. So, and there is an appeals process, by the way, if that happens. So you should email me if that happens.
I'm just gonna go take it in a room where they're not gonna pull that nonsense on me.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine the challenge of having to acoustically fingerprint a room and like kind of control all the variables. You'd be shocked at the amount of cheating that goes on. I can't tell you any numbers, but I'm like, really? Wow. I'm actually on the security like appeal board when someone like disputes the thing, and I'm like, I just started that. I'm like, wow, there's some brassy people out there. And look at this, we actually have Spanish on there, so that's awesome. I'm hoping they're going to add more spoken languages over the next year or so. That'd be fun. All right, so you're going to confirm your written language. You're going to confirm your preferred time zone. Yeah, that's right. And then what happens is, just so you know, since SAA is so popular, like we could probably take it today if we really wanted to. Let's see. Let's see. Are all of these open? They look like they're all open, actually. Next available appointment is November 18th. Huh. Well, they changed this interface. This is brand new. I think there's 140 minutes. Probably wouldn't want to take it that morning. Let's see. Wow. Wow, they're this busy. I wonder what happened here. Huh. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting all wrapped up in this. I can look at this some other time later. So just know that you usually come in here, and actually let's switch over to December and see if there's other opportunities available, because usually it's a little brighter. So it looks like they've got appointments like in the wee hours of the morning. Huh. Anyway, so you usually come in here, you pick your time. This interface has changed a lot. So let's say you want to do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. General recommendation, please take the exam at a time when you are naturally awake without coffee. So if you crash in the afternoon, please don't take it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're awake at 10 a.m., that would be a great time to take it. You can't take it on the weekends, by the way. You could also take it at 1 o'clock in the morning. Remember, this is a follow the sun certification cycle, so you can take it at any time you want to. Once you have booked your appointment, what will happen is they're going to ask you to confirm. And by the way, if you want to add another exam, you can. I don't know anybody who does that. But notice right here, this is where you stick the promo code. So notice that after you've chosen your appointment, your written language, your spoken language, you get to the very end and they're going to ask you for credit card information and billing information. This is where you submit your promo code, your voucher code that you got. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, not everybody gets vouchers, but I believe that most of Booz Allen does. And it should be in your portal about how to get access to the voucher. If you have any doubts about that, just email support at webhsolutions.com. Greg Wagner, by the way, is your primary liaison. His email address is greg.wagner@webhsolutions.com. So I want to make sure that link is there. So just email Greg. Greg is a great guy. He's been working with Booz for like 25 years. Just tell him you're having problems and he'll help you figure it out. Okay.
One quick question. So if I have to cancel my exam on Thursday, will I lose the voucher or will I have to get a new voucher?
Nope. I've done that a bunch of times. The voucher reactivates and comes back to you. They
Okay.
like release it. Give it a little bit of time though after you cancel it. It's sometimes immediately after you cancel, it needs about 30 minutes for it to process the release, and then you
Okay.
can reschedule.
Okay.
Notice in this case, if you have a voucher, this will go to 0. If this goes to 0, all of this pretty much goes away for the most part. Like, I don't think email address and phone number goes away, but the rest of it does. If you did a 50% discount, this would drop to 75. You still have to stick in all your information, and then you'd be good to go. Okay. And then I'm not going to click next because I'm not going to submit any credit card information, but then it would say, are you sure? You say yes, and then immediately it sends you a bunch of emails. Read this, run a systems test. This is your date. Do you want to add this to your calendar? It's going to send a bunch of stuff to you. I would immediately put it on your calendar if it didn't already do it for you, and just make sure that you've got it blocked off. Don't forget that you have an exam. Okay. And that's it. And this is probably the third most important thing, is just know that the voucher codes are at the end when you put in payment and billing. Okay. Questions of any type before we get to the fun stuff? Okay. All right. In your portal, let's go to WebAge Solutions, see if I can log in to a portal here. Let's see. Do I have access to a portal? Forrester at, let's see. Well, maybe it's ITM. So maybe not. Let's see. I don't know what this is actually. Anyway, let me see if I actually saved it. I don't think I did actually. I don't think I did. So what this will do is, if you are logged in, what this will do is this will actually take you to a portal. And the portal will contain a bunch of documents in it. Some of it will be videos of like how to study. Some of it will be like how to get your voucher. One of the documents will be how to get access to the practice exams. This is actually going to take you to a website, which I hope most of you have already signed up for, called Tutorials Dojo. Now, Tutorials Dojo, if you go in and do a portal link, and I think, they have a whole process that you need to follow. Once you sign in, it'll list like all your products. Now, I just want to throw this back to you. John Bonzo, the guy who does this, great guy, met him at reInvent. Young, but he's a little old school around websites. You're gonna get a bunch of pop-ups like this. Just ignore it. Right? Just ignore the pop-ups. It's just gonna happen. This is where we're gonna spend the rest of our time, actually. And usually I only spend about an hour doing this. So just so you know, we will end a little bit early. And by the way, if at any point in time anyone needs to go, know that I will not be offended. You will have this recording. I believe it's sent out to you. So just know that if you've already given me an hour of your precious time. So, but hopefully this next part will actually be even more valuable than the stuff we've already done. Okay. So, so Solutions Architect Associates. So here it is, the exams. And so you'll have this as an option once you've like registered to get your exams. Now, notice that you have the option of doing the following types of practice exams inside this section. So for example, you could do time mode exams, you could do review mode exams, you could do section based, You can do topic based, and you can do a final test, and there's flashcards. All right, here's what I want you to take away from this. Ignore everything except for review mode. You could also do section and topic based, but for the most part, I want you to focus on review mode exams. Don't do time mode. Please do not do the final test. It's not fun. It's not as much fun as you want it to be. And the flashcards are horrible. I've already given John a bunch of static for this, okay? But the review mode exams are where you want to live and breathe. This is step, was it 4, right? This is the test to see whether or not you're ready to take the exam. What's the test? If you can come in here and stone cold without any review, take one of these tests, the review mode test, and pass it with a 90% or better, you're ready to sign up and take your exam. If you cannot pass one of these stone cold with a 90% or better, you're not ready to take the exam. I'll give you an example. Let's go back to 1. The reason, by the way, we use these is because these are actually study exams. They're not practice exams. They are practice, but they're really study exams. So, by the way, you're not going to know on the actual exam what topic you're in. So this is in design resilient architectures. You're not going to know which domain you're in. So just consider that a bonus. All right, so here we got a company planning to host a web application and auto-scaling group of EC2 instances. It's pretty standard. Auto-scaling typically is associated with EC2, although there are other things that use auto-scaling. Application is going to be used globally by users to upload and store several types of files based on trends. Files that are older than 2 years must be stored in a different storage class. So first of all, the fact that they even mentioned storage class is already triggering me for that they must be talking about S3, because S3 is the only real service other than EFS that uses storage classes. So the SA of the company needs to create a cost-effective and yet scalable solution to store the old files, yet still provide durability and high availability. Well, if you know anything about S3, you know it's very durable and it's very highly available. So as we look through this, I've kind of already given you the answer because I said S3 twice. Even though they have auto scaling in here in EC2, what they're really looking for is a cost-effective, scalable solution that is both durable and highly available. That's a lot of asks, actually. Now, even without reading the questions, this has S3 in it. This has EFS. This has EBS. This has EBS. This has S3. So even without reading the question, I can tell you that this is the fastest and yes, most expensive way and a non-HA way to store files. This is also the same. And EFS is actually really good, and especially if you use the lower storage tiers with EFS, it can be comparable to S3. But I would say it's still going to be more expensive than S3 because it is a file system, and EFS is generally more expensive, right? You don't need to know the exact numbers. You just need to know that in general, EFS is more expensive. So I already know that I probably want this S3 and this S3, and of course I checked them earlier and check. Now, here's where these become practice exams and they turn into study exams. John is going to tell you what the right answer is. Boom. But then he's going to tell you why the other answers are wrong. And it's not what you think, for example, for EFS, because the EFS lifecycle policy is 90 days, right? Which means that the requirement is to move files that are older than 2 years. So you have some limitations for how EFS functions to where it actually doesn't work. Plus, it's a little bit more expensive. 2, they're going to tell you that EBS costs more. They're going to tell you that EBS costs more, but they're also going to tell you that RAID is not awesome for this. And RAID 0 in particular is going to break redundancy or high availability. So that's not making any sense. And then he's going to give you references as to where he got the answers from. And then if you keep getting S3 answers wrong, he's going to give you a cheat sheet that you can study. So he's going to do this for every question that we look at. So for example, SA needs to make sure the on-demand EC2 instances can only be accessed from 110.238.98.71 via SSH. So what are we talking about? Well, first of all, SSH runs on which port? Well, 22, and that's easy to figure out because all the answers have 22. We know he wants it from this IP address, so here's the source. But now you got to figure out what basic networking is. These are CIDR ranges, right? So do I want to set /0 or do I want to /32? Someone tell me.
0.
Anybody else? Just checking. I want to agree with that. All right.
And just know it needs to be the biggest one, biggest range that you want to go for that you can afford to do. I just can't remember if it's 0 or 32.
Well, that's if you're setting up a VPC. Here, we're actually setting up a security group rule, a firewall
Ah.
rule that says, I only want to allow traffic from this specific port using this specific protocol from this specific IP address. So just to be clear, just so you know, a /32 means only this IP address. So the larger the number, the smaller the range, right? 0 actually means
All of it.
Yeah,
Everything.
everything somewhere, right? Although it's going to be a little weird with these numbers here, but that's a whole different discussion. So it's actually a /32 to say, I want this specific IP address and only this IP address. It's definitely port 22, which we have in both answers. But since this is a secure protocol that does actually do retries and whatnot, it's going to be TCP. It's not going to be UDP. So they assume that you know that just based on what's in the question. You hit check because I could be making it up. Guess what? Now, John's going to tell you exactly why this is correct, right? Because 0 allows the entire network instead of a single IP address, which is exactly what I said, right? As well as the protocol ranges and the port ranges. Note that protocol uses TCP and port 22. So it kind of narrows down the answers for you. Then he's going to give you the references that you could look at. So you could click on this and go look at the official docs if you wanted to. And then he's got a study guide, which I don't recommend. John needs to work on his study guides. Okay. So that's what we're going to do for the remainder of the class after we take a break. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. And just know, again, I just want to make sure I'm very upfront about this. If all of you need to go, I am more than glad to stay here. But otherwise, we're going to spend the next hour when we get back at 3:30. We're going to spend the next hour going through all the exam questions. And then I'm going to open the floor up for questions. And we'll probably end somewhere between 4:30 and 5. Okay. So right now, we're going to take a 15-minute break. But before we go, does anyone have any questions?
Nope, no questions.
Okay. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to pause the recording. If you decide to leave, it was great seeing you, great having you here. If you have any questions for me directly that I haven't answered already, just send them here. That's my web agent email address. If you want to catch me at Amazon, you can just catch me here. That's my Amazon address. Just email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go off camera, stop the pause the recording. When we come back at 3:30, if people are still here, you're going to go through and I'm going to teach you how to analyze the questions. And then I'm just going to have you take your best guesses of answers of questions, because this is how you get ready for the exam. Once you've done the studying, once you've done the labs, this is how you prepare for it. And again, just one last question before we go. Does anyone remember what I said you needed to get a percentage on these exams before you were ready to take the test?
90.
90. No one questioned that, by the way. Does anyone know why I said 90?
I'm guessing because you're going to miss some, and so you might as well be getting 90. And these are as good as the last time the questions were refreshed.
Exactly. In other words, first of all, this is not an exam dump. So these questions are not going to be exactly what you see on the exam. 2, you're exactly right? Because you're going to get nervous and you're going to miss some questions. So I have you train for a 90, but what do you need in order to pass the SAA exam? Does anyone know?
720.
Right, 720, 750, somewhere around there, right? Basically, you need a C. So just know that I'm having you overtrain because you're going to be nervous, and these aren't exam dump questions, but these are going to get you really close to the exam. These are the best exam questions we have without cheating. Okay? So 90 percentile, if you can get 90%, you're ready to go. All right? Any other questions before I pause this for 15 minutes?
Nope.
Okay. I'll be back at 3:30. If I don't see you, great. If I do, great. Otherwise, we'll see you in 30 minutes.
Okay.
So continue recording. Okay, before we hop in to do some basically practice, like it's gonna be like a workout when practice, right? If we do any practice, anyone have any questions for me about either the exam guides, the expertise building, the labs access, or the access to the tutorial dojo itself?
Oh, sorry, nope.
So I have a personal question around this. So I know that you said that if you don't have, hands-on experience or practical experience in AWS, that you should probably go back to the cloud practitioner exam. However, some of us here may have been selected during the latest, senior leadership attempt to get us upskilled on AWS, and they, instead of putting me into cloud practitioner, they put me into solutions architect. So maybe they just had a lot of faith, or they had lots of space. So took the class, got most of the concepts, is rooted in, a lot of it's rooted in, like I'll say legacy architectures, but just souped up, so to speak. So I kind of follow along. So I'm intent on taking this. Do you think I need more than 40 hours of training?
No, I mean, if you feel like you got the concepts, and you're willing to, just pay attention to where you feel like you're gapped, then I think you'll be fine, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You made me a little nervous there.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you've got production level experience, but I mean, that's the ideal. Understand that the target candidate for the exam and what the exam is testing for, they're just slightly apart, so it should be fine.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, if we had space and time, I would say go cloud practitioner, but I think most of you are under a pretty, like, you have a deadline of like next 90 days or something, right? So
It's by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, they expanded it to the end of the year.
yeah, so you've got 60 days, of which at least 2 or 3 weeks of that is holidays. So
Right.
it's not done by December 17th. It's not going to happen, honestly. So for most people. So yeah, so I just stick with it. Just pay attention to your gaps. And to be clarify what I said about the testing piece. The general thing we do with the practice exams is that we want you to take at least 3 of the practice exams and get 90%. Like if you can't take 1 and get 90, then at this point you're in a study mode. And so what you end up is you take one of the, and it doesn't matter which 3 it is. There's 6 review mode exams. You can take 1, 5, and 4 if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. But you're going to take 1 and keep taking 1, review mode set 1 until you get 90%. Then you're going to take the second one, take that one until you can get 90%. And you're gonna be like, well, Michael, am I not at this point memorizing the questions? Well, no. First of all, if you can memorize 195 questions and their specific answers, you've earned the right to pass the exam. We've had this question internally where people are like, well, should we offer more than 1,100 questions on and it's like, let me tell you something. If someone memorizes 400 answers, they've learned AWS, right? Because in the sense they have. If I tell you, that, I need you to use the storage class that, is because I have random access patterns and I don't know what my access patterns are. And you memorize that it's intelligent tiering. And then you're sitting in a meeting and someone goes, well, we don't really know what our access patterns are. And we don't really know how to optimize costs inside of AWS. You're going to be like, oh, yeah, you probably use intelligent tiering for that. Right. So it's a trivia exam. It's not a hands-on lab exam. So just to say this is that we typically recommend that you take 3 of these tests, master 1 until you get 90% plus, do another until you get 90% plus, do a third until you get 90% plus. If you don't have production experience, if you have production experience, just take 2 and get 90%, and then go take the exam at that point in time. But if you want to know cold, if you're ready to take the exam, just take any one of these. If you can't get 90%, you're not ready. You would think that, by the way, that seeing the exam questions that I would have an advantage. I actually have a disadvantage, because we get into arguments about what the answers are. And so that's what I remember. And so I was reminded today that I actually should be failing the exams at a higher rate. But my point being is that take 3 of these 6 exams, these practice exams, just do them again and again till you get 90%. And you're definitely ready to go at that point in time. So you should be fine, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Now, I do want to point out that every one of these, by the way, takes about 90 minutes to 2 hours to do. So if you have to go through this 3 times, that's going to be 6 hours of time, just so you're aware.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. And I just want you all to be warned, by the end of like your 10th run through the practice exams, you just feel near suicidal. you know, where you're like, oh my God, one more question on DynamoDB. So just make sure you pace it out every day, because otherwise, as my child said to me once, it's like rubbing your face against a cheese grater. It's just not fun. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
You know, teenagers have those colorful ways with words. Other questions? Okay. All right. So we're on to a whole different set. And what I'm going to do is for the first few questions, I'm going to analyze them. I'm going to walk you through my analysis. And then I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say, is it, you know, A, B, C, or D? And you're going to, in chat, you're going to type in your answer. And then I'm going to show you the answer. And just so you know, whatever the most frequent stated answer is the one I'm going to click on, even if it's not the right answer. Okay. So in this one, and I'm going to point out how to analyze this question, by the way. So we got a global news network created the CloudFront distribution for their web application. So first of all, I'm glad it's a global news network, because CloudFront can be restricted to a continent, but it's mainly a global caching system. Now, CloudFront is the global caching system for web applications mainly. So this is good. This all lines up, right? However, you notice that the application's origin server is being hit for each request instead of the edge locations, which serve the cached objects. So first of all, they're already challenging you to know whether or not you know how CloudFront works. And here's how it works. You get an origin server, which is the source, like your web server. And then what happens is that all of Amazon's edge servers, which are located all over the world, they are the servers that get a cached copy of your website. And so what's happening is that instead of hitting the edge servers, which is what they're designed to do, they're going straight back to the source. And this issue is occurring for objects that are commonly requested. So now what's happening is that they're saying, what could be the possible reason out of the 4 options listed below as to why, instead of using the edge servers for CloudFront, they're going back to the origin? So A, B, C, or D, what do you think? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter. Either one's fine for me. All right. So I've got a majority. Most of you have said C. The control cache max age directive is set to 0, which, by the way, if that's the answer, it does require you to know that that has to be set to something other than 0 to function, right? So let's check it out. Good. So that is the answer. Now, this doesn't make any sense, because they said, well, this issue is occurring for commonly requested objects, which means objects that are requested repeatedly. This would only happen the first time an object is requested, is that we go back to origin. Once it goes back to origin, it then puts a cached copy on the edge. And it does that for every new edge that requests it. So if a bunch of people in Russia decide to access your web server, all of the edge servers near Russia are going to be the ones who get the cached copy of your website. But that's only going to happen the first time. Every subsequent user in Russia who accesses that website, as long as it hasn't expired, is going to now access the cached copy. They're not going to go back to origin. So that doesn't make any sense. A. The file size of the cached object is too large for CloudFront to handle. Well, then that's a whole different problem, and you would see a different error message. So that doesn't make any sense. There are 2 primary origins configured in your CloudFront origin group. If I remember correctly, I don't think you can do that. I think you can have a primary and a secondary, but I don't think you can have 2 primaries, but I could be wrong about that. Regardless, you can't have 2 sources active at any given time if I remember correctly. This, by the way, just shows you how all this functions. Let's go check our thing. They were successfully requested. Oh yeah, so commonly requested objects. File size is not related to issuing caching. You cannot set 2 origins in CloudFront, 2 primary origins. You can have a primary and a secondary, but you can't have 2 primaries. So 2 origins are a primary and secondary, which is actually what I just said. So they're forcing you to know at a superficial level all this stuff about CloudFront. That's it. So this is pretty much how the rest of this all goes. And if you didn't know, by the way, about cache control and expiration and the directives, John's going to give you all that so you can see it. But this is how we use these as study guides, is that we learn the right answers and we very clearly know why the other answers are wrong, because there's a logic behind it. And if you don't know the logic, you won't know how to apply it when you run into it in a different form. Because remember, these questions are not exam dumps. This is going to come to you in a different form. Although it still shocks me how much of these questions are actually on the exam. John didn't intend for that to happen, but it does happen. Questions about this question?
And not about this question, but I think earlier you said if you get the same type of question wrong over and over again, you get a different help, like a cheat sheet or something.
Yeah, so if he has a cheat sheet, he'll always list it, whether you've gotten it wrong or not.
Oh, okay.
But if you keep getting CloudFront questions wrong, like you notice it, not him, then what will happen is it's recommended that you then go to the cheat sheet. In this particular case, I would go to the cheat sheet and maybe just skim it over so you can understand exactly what you don't know about CloudFront, for example. Like if you don't know how CloudFront functions, then you need to go out and read this sheet, or go read the AWS docs.
Thanks.
So, yeah, that was my recommendation. I wonder if I got this wrong or if I did it with a group. All right, so let's look at this question. This one already has the answer, so we'll just, you know what? Yeah, let's look at it anyway. This is a good one. All right, so I got a website hosted on ECS. Does anyone know what ECS stands for?
Elastic Container Service.
Good. What's the sister service to Elastic Container Service? What's the other container service?
KS.
EKS.
EKS, yeah. ECS is generally considered a much easier to use, but it's very proprietary to AWS. EKS is basically a CNCF certified distribution of Kubernetes. So just know that we're using the simpler version and not the more complex one, but the more complex one has more capabilities. So this is ECS, the Elastic Container Service. So we notice that the website that's on these instances loads slowly during peak traffic, of course, which affects its performance. Currently, the instances are run behind an ALB, and CloudWatch alarms are configured to send notifications if there's a problem, so they can scale out if needed, right? Which is kind of interesting because it's like a manual process. Is that what we're going to want? So an SA needs to create an automatic scaling solution, which is kind of what I was thinking, right? So what do? So in this particular case, interesting. So in all of these, they're basically saying, look, I want to create a scaling policy that scales out either the cluster or the service. Service, cluster, service. And what they're calling out is whether you want to do it when an ALB target group, when the ALB hits, when the service's memory is too high, when the cluster CPU utilization is too high, or when the ALB endpoint becomes unreachable. So they're making like two distinctions here, right? Is it the cluster or the service? And is it relevant for like these different components that are behind the back end? Now, in this particular case, I don't think this was me, actually. It was just class. We're testing whether or not the cluster scales out the cluster, like adds more to the cluster, if the target group that makes up the load balancer's like targeted group for that endpoint, if the CPU utilization is too high, we're saying, look, I want you to scale the cluster. The other thing we're saying, so that takes care of CPU, is that if the ECS service is running out of memory, like utilization is just buffering out, then we want to scale that as well. Now we look down and see what's wrong, like with the other answers. It said it'd be a different problem that needs to be addressed if this is the case. An unreachable ALB endpoint means that other things have failed, which is true. This one says ALB is a managed resource, so you can't really, just so you know, most of the objects inside of AWS are virtual objects. So an ALB actually consists of a bunch of like virtual load balancers, but you're only accessing the virtual endpoint. So you don't have to worry about scaling most of Amazon's objects, like a managed NAT gateway. That's a virtual object that has a bunch of like network cards underneath it. So our traditional concepts of like, well, I have a single object that I'm managing in software does not actually represent the actual true number of objects underneath it. So with an ALB, we're not going to scale it because it automatically gets handled by AWS. The option that says create an auto scaling policy that scales out the cluster when the target group CPU utilization is too high. This one I thought was a little interesting because it says service memory utilization is too high, cluster CPU utilization is too high. And that's really what we want. Because the reason this doesn't make any sense, and I might have misspoke about this earlier, is that we're scaling out the cluster when the load balancers, like target group, the thing it's looking at, when that CPU utilization is too high. But the thing it's attached to is going to be services. So there's this whole kind of like thing where you need to understand that if you want to scale out CPUs in the cluster, well, you got to monitor the cluster. If you want to scale out service memory, well, you got to monitor the service. So here it's the service, here it's the cluster. We're scaling out the cluster, we're scaling out the service. So the problem is that these don't match. These don't match. Does that make sense to everybody? They don't line up.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't even really on it. It's more like technical wordplay. You want to scale out the service? You got to monitor the service. You want to scale out the cluster? You got to monitor the cluster. You're not going to scale out the service if the ALB hits a high. You're not going to scale out the cluster if the ALB target group, which actually does include the nodes, right? You're not going to scale out the service because the load balancer failed. Questions? All right. All right, one more. I'm gonna let you just read it and answer. So I'm gonna go silent. We're gonna I'm gonna put up a timer actually, and you're just gonna do it. Okay. So an SA is working for a weather station in Asia with a weather monitoring system. They want to migrate to AWS. Since the monitoring system requires a low latency network and a high throughput, high network throughput, the architect decided to launch the EC2 instances to a new cluster placement group. Now, by the way, placement groups didn't show up until in the architecting class until like within the last 6 months. System's been working fine. So we launched our EC2 instances and we put them clustered together on the same physical hardware, typically in the same availability zone. System's been working great for weeks. However, when they try to add a new virtual machine to the hardware that they're already sitting on with all the other virtual machines, when they try to add another one, it says, you know what, that hardware has an insufficient capacity error. So then the question becomes, if you stick a bunch of EC2 instances in a cluster placement group, which means they're running on the same hardware inside of one of Amazon's data centers, and you try to add a new virtual machine to that group of virtual machines, and it's telling you it doesn't have sufficient capacity, how do you fix the issue? All right, so take a minute, read the question yourself, look at the answers, either A, B, C, or D. Wow. I say wow because of me, not because of you. Okay. So let's see. Saw a B and 3 C's. So let me guess a C. All right. So isn't it interesting? Because the old answer was basically like stop everything, like delete it, create another placement group and relaunch with the number that you wanted. That's the old answer, right? Now what's happening is they're saying, look, we've got a logical group of instances. They're like, you know, peered in the same VPC in the same region, right? Because there's spread, partition, and cluster, right? So what we're saying is that what you can do now is that if you receive a capacitor, we're launching the instance, just stop all the instances, start and launch them again. So what will happen is that this is now going to launch them, because when you stop a virtual machine on AWS, and it's in a cluster placement group, let's say you've added the number, you said 9, but I don't have capacity. If you stop them all, it's going to basically take away their hardware association. And when you start them all, it's now going to look for a spot where it can launch 9 virtual machines of that capacity at the same time and launch them on that hardware. So when you stop virtual machines, they actually move to another piece of hardware. So that's then why this is now the new answer. It used to be that you had to delete them, create a new group with a new number, and relaunch the whole thing. But now if you stop them, you can now relaunch that entire replacement group with the new number on a new set of hardware. Make sense?
It makes sense. So the idea though is to, since they're all logically associated with each other, to keep them in the same placement group, rather than have 2 and just do the stop and start, it resizes to what it needs to be.
Yes.
Is that about right? Okay.
Yeah, because what happened here is that they actually tried to start. Can you still see my screen, by the way?
Yeah.
So what happened here is they actually tried to add a new instance and they said we have insufficient capacity. So instead they said basically stop it, add the new instance, and then start it, basically is what they're doing, right? Stop and restart the instances and then try to launch again to see if there's another capacity. Now I will tell you, if that doesn't work, you're going to need to create a new placement group. So that actually is a viable option. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. Now for this one, just to check. Can you see my timer?
Yeah.
Good. All right. So I'll give you 2 minutes. Read it, place an answer. As soon as I see 4 or so answers in there, I'll go ahead and pop in. Okay. So A, B, C, or D. Okay. I got 3 Ds. Let's see. Take a vote. Even though we're close, we got about 10 seconds left. Okay, let's check it out. I'm gonna answer. Okay, so D. How did you know that organizations and SCPs are going to be the answer? What gave it away?
I just remember from reading, when you have multiple accounts across different things, you use the organizations, or you look for organizations in the answer. That's what I remember.
Okay, good. So you want to manage multiple accounts. So it could be consolidated billing. It could be security policies. How did you know the SCPs were in play? Service control policies.
I don't think that one I didn't. That was a guess.
Okay, no, fair enough. Still valid. And you did guess logically, right? You were like, oh, I remember organizations being part of, multiple account management. So you knew it, you could know SCPs are part of it because there's a requirement to ensure that access to certain services and actions are properly controlled to comply with security policy. Well, you do that with SCPs across an organization. SCPs, by the way, are only restrictive, meaning they can only deny you access. They do not grant you access. Although by not denying someone access, it allows someone at the account level to grant access, which is the only level that happens at. So just know that SCPs can only deny. They do not like specifically grant access. They just allow something to happen. They're like permissions. They're like, you could eat a Snickers if you want to, because it's the day after Halloween. But you got to talk to your parents, because I don't know. I'm only the grandparent or something like that. That'd be weird. I'm not a grandparent, but whatever. That'd be strange. Not ready for that. So you're thinking of SCPs as that way, is that they just allow something to happen. They do not grant permissions. Good. Any other comments or questions? Anybody else struggle with this?
So I know there's different ways to control access, but is the service control policy is the one where you want to deny all to begin with when you first set up, and then allow by exception, or so that you're not automatically allowing everything, or maybe that's something different.
No, that's the IAM policy. So
As I am
Just-
policy, okay.
just know by default, with SCPs, you're allowed everything. With IAM policies, which happen at the account level, not at the organization level, the IAM policies at the account level by default will deny you everything. So you don't get access to a service unless someone has granted you explicit allow access. But if
Okay.
someone goes in and explicitly denies you access, you will never get access to that system until that explicit deny is removed.
Okay.
So there's an implicit, like invisible deny that says nobody gets access to anything unless someone says yes. The second level is someone has said yes, so there's an allow. So I now can use EC2. But if someone then comes in and says explicitly, thou shalt not use EC2, then no matter how many yeses I have at the second level, an explicit no trumps everything else.
Okay.
And that's an IAM policy. Now, above that, if there is an SCP that says thou shalt not use EC2, you will also not be able to grant access to EC2. So an explicit SCP at the top level of an organization that has a bunch of AWS accounts inside of it, if someone says, nope, you can't use EC2, you can't use EC2. Even
Okay.
if you're granted access at the account level, it's still denied.
It makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Oh, and by the way, here's a picture of it. You know, the accounts, the member AWS accounts are organized into organizational units called OUs, and they can be labeled whatever you want, prod, non-prod, whatever. Policies are applied either to the member accounts, to the organizational units, or to the meta organizational unit called the root OU. And those can be set up to inherit down. So they'll trickle down to everybody who's underneath that forest, that branch, if that makes any sense. So just know it's there. Okay. Let's see. Did we already answer this one? Yeah, we did. Let's get this one. Okay. I'm going to put up a timer. Same deal. 2 minutes. Let's go. A, B, C, or D. All right, I got a tiebreaker even at 40 seconds in. All right, so which service should you use for the scenario? So, okay, so let's see. Marukabidi. I'm
Yep,
sure I
I'm here.
mangled that horribly. I apologize. if I
That's
did.
okay, no problem.
But I do like your name, Marukabidi. So tell me, what made it so that Kinesis was your answer? Like, what did you think? You were like, I know that Kinesis is going to be the service for this.
Real time.
Real time.
Anything when there's real time processing needed.
And I think that's accurate. Now, there's another service other than Kinesis that will also stream real time. Do you know what that is?
No, I do not know actually.
Good. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, just in case, so that way your logic is complete. Managed service for Kafka, also referred to as MFK, which is basically Kafka,
Uh-huh.
also will do real-time streaming. So Kinesis is the primary usual answer, but if you ever see it real time and Kinesis isn't there, but you see MSK or a managed service for Kafka there, that also can do real time because Kafka is an open source real-time service, right?
Okay.
They invented Kinesis, by the way, before Kafka was mainstream. So otherwise, they
Uh-huh.
probably never would have done that, honestly. All right, so good. So you saw real time, you saw every 5 seconds, and you were like, that's it. We're going to use Kinesis. So perfect. Logic's flawless. Now, does anyone know, by the way, what AppStream does?
I didn't, that's why I didn't pick it. And I,
No, I don't know what AppStream does.
So AppStream is interesting because actually we're the wrong answers. Anyway, AppStream allows you basically to take like a copy of Office on a server and stream it over to somebody on a client. So they can actually use the window on their client, but this Office is actually running on someone else's machine. Old technology. It's been around since 2010, 2011. Used to be part of the whole VDI infrastructure thing. Anyway,
Huh.
not a big deal. But let me just
Okay.
say this. Never used. Like there are customers who use it, but not on the exam. So you'll usually see it as what they call a distractor. Okay.
Okay.
So good to know. Data pipeline is used for like data pipeline management. Very unusual to see it nowadays. People either use the database migration service or they use data sync, which is used to transfer data between storage. Now the simple queuing service, though, here's a funny story. The simple queuing service was the first service announced by AWS in 2006, but it was not the first service release. I actually found out recently that S3 was actually the first service release right after it was SQS, but SQS was the first service announced, which is really weird. So, because they didn't announce S3 at all, they just launched it. So, Kinesis is the answer, and to Maruka Bidi's point is that it's because Kinesis is the real-time streaming product. Other than MSK, it's the flagship product for that process. Now, there are 4 different versions. There's actually one missing here. There's video streams. So there's data firehose, data analytics, and data streams. Actually, there's another missing. And then there's video streams. So the main one that everyone talks about is data streams, which is what they're referring to here. And there's also data firehose, and data analytics and video streams are rarely show up. If you ever decide to take the database or the analytics exam, you're going to learn all about those. Okay. So, but the logic makes sense. Anyone have any questions about the logic? If you see real time or near real time, you're typically going to look at Kinesis as the answer. Okay. Next. All right, so here we are. We'll start the timer. We'll give this one a shot. Oh, wow. Plethora of answers here. Okay. Achieve, Jennifer. Okay, let's see. We got A, B, B. So we're kind of split down the middle. Who wants to be the tiebreaker here? What do we think?
I think it's B.
I think it's B. Okay, let's take a vote for B. Let's see it. Okay. All right. Now, let's see. Like, so Rajiv, so I'm gonna ask you. You thought it was 22. Why did you think it was 22? Let me ask. Because and understand there's no failure here. We're gonna understand the thought process to see if there's anything to shift.
Because earlier we were talking about 22 being the TCP port, so that's what kind of drew me to port 22.
Good. Good. Because for SSH, right? That's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, for SSH. And so this is like kind of one of those weird things where like Amazon tests your industry knowledge, which I kind of agree, kind of disagree with, because like, does everybody deal with this on a regular basis? Like, I don't even know that I've logged into a Windows system for the last 10 years. Now, that being said, prior to the last 10 years, I logged into a lot of them, so I actually happen to know the answer to this. But if you're using SSH, which is typically the Linux, although there are Windows instances like Core that use SSH, you use port 22. But with remote desktop, it uses port 3389, which has been the default since Microsoft came out with it however long ago, right? But it's one of those like weird background things that they're like testing to see if you know, because if you have logged into a Windows box on EC2 on AWS, then you would have done it on port 3389, and you would have had to like know this. So in your head, know that if it's SSH, it's going to be on 22. If it's remote desktop, it's typically going to be on port 3389. Sometimes it can be on 443, but 3389 is the standard. And so that's just basically an industry like knowledge test. That's all it is. Now, if you were going to take a security group, which is a concept inside of AWS, and you were going to put that in your data center, what would you call it if a security group was in your data center? Does anyone know?
Say that question again.
So a security group is a concept of a service, like a function that exists inside of AWS. If you were going to take a security group and put it inside your data center, what would you call a security group that was inside your data center? You wouldn't call it a security group. What would you call it?
Oh.
ACLs?
Well, ACLs are part of this object that I'm talking about. What do we call security groups when they live inside of our on-premise data center? And we use ACLs and we use these rules to block access. But what do we call those devices that control ingress and egress from a security perspective inside of a network?
Hypervisor? No.
Close.
It's like I can't think of it. I'm like I'm drawing a blank.
No, it's good. Good. Now remember, we like it when we don't have the answer, when we don't know, because then it allows us to know. So it's a firewall. Yeah, a security group is nothing more than just a fancy name for a firewall, right? That's all it is. So because if you were dealing with a firewall like IP tables or checkpoint or Fortinet or whatever in your data center, you'd have to allow inbound traffic from a particular port, from a particular IP address. Those are all rules. These are just standard firewall concepts. So the things to take away from this is that a security group is just a firewall, and that the remote desktop protocol, the connection, runs over port 3389, and that SSH runs over 22. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Nope.
Okay. We're on to the next one. Timer's up. Okay. Got my third vote there. All right, see D's. Okay, check it out. Okay. Good. So, Jennifer, you didn't answer actually. So, tell me what went on in your
Okay.
head there.
Well, I didn't answer because I saw what everybody else was putting and I was like, and D looked right to me, but then I was like, oh, maybe it's not D. So I just like kind of screw myself over. But D made sense to me because it is global and you want to have it in multiple availability zones to ensure availability. So that made sense to me.
Okay. Good.
But then I was like, I don't remember what Lambda Edge did. And I think that's where I got hung up was I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember what Lambda did.
So Lambda at edge would allow you to push like simple compute processes towards the edge, like authentication, for example. Like if you wanted users to log in, they could log in on the cache servers instead of the origin servers. And that would be helpful, but that wouldn't necessarily make your application resilient. It would just make the
No,
authentication
so
process
that's for
resilient.
edge computing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then S3 to serve the dynamic content. Well, typically, just so you know, S3 can host static content, but it can't do dynamic content. So B's out. But C and D was tricky. Did anybody else get thrown off by that? When I read it, I was like, oh, hold on.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to, when I put D at first, I was like, wait, scaling, wait a minute, hold on. So,
But
yeah,
here's the catch. They didn't say the auto scaling group was actually going to run across a bunch of availability zones. And by default, they run in the same availability zone.
Okay.
So by not specifying that the auto scaling group was going to run across multiple availability zones, they kind of took it out of the running, because Amazon's very explicit best practice is that if you have a production application and you want it to be highly available, it must run across 2 availability zones in a region. Because if Amazon has a data center failure, they're going to shut that whole data center down, which is going to shut that availability zone down. So if you have another web server running with your content, then your load balancer could just point towards the new one or the second one, right? So that's why having 2 EC2 instances deployed in 2 AZs, even though there's no auto scaling, there's no application load balancer even stated in front of them, but the CloudFront's going to talk to one and then fail over to the other one. That's high availability, is that you now have redundancy in case a component fails. That's what high availability is what happens. So fault tolerance is when a component inside the computer fails. High availability is what happens when the computer fails. Is there another computer to take it over? Or is there a whole fleet of computers to take it over? Right? That's what high availability is. And typically, high availability will go across data centers. Now, if it was the disaster recovery instead of high availability, what would that failure go across?
regions, right?
Exactly right. Disaster recovery typically, and it depends on your definition, because sometimes the distances are short enough for you to do it within a region. But most of the time, when they say, I want full disaster recovery, what they're saying is that if a meteor hits Atlanta, can I fail over to Virginia? Which I'm in Atlanta, so I'm kind of hoping that doesn't happen anytime soon. Although it would be a quick way to go. Okay. Good. Great. Michael says that. You know, here it comes. Cool. Any questions?
Nope.
All right. Let's do the next one. All right. Timer's up. Oh, good. There's a bevy of answers there. Okay. So I see a bunch of A's. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this a little short. Check this out. Oh,
Hmm,
okay, good.
the
Good, okay.
region.
Yep. So again, remember these features change all the time, right? All right, so just to frame this up, several encrypted EBS snapshots in their VPC. SA must ensure that all new EBS volumes restored from the automatic snapshots are automatically encrypted. So this is an automated process. So what can happen here, and this is something, this is something where the other thing that we often recommend is that you go look at the blogs, the AWS blogs for like the last year, just skim them. Problem is that we used to recommend that and it's kind of overwhelming. So we now don't recommend that. Not only that, just so you know, Amazon will never test you on anything that's younger than 6 months. Let me say that again in case you missed that. If the service came out within the last 6 months, we're not going to test you on it. We might write a question in future data so it'll show up in a future exam, but you're never going to get asked about something that just came out within the last 6 months. We don't do that. And we also, by the way, never ask you about numbers that are going to change, like how much memory does a M4 5X large have or whatever. Here, though, what's happening is that we're trying to enable EBS encryption, which is EBS is the hard drive service for EC2. That's all it's used for. EC2 is the only service that can use EBS. And so it's just the fast hard drive service, which, by the way, it's kind of impressive. I'm going to say so myself. It's nice. But you can actually configure your entire account to enforce the encryption of new EBS volumes and snapshots. So like here, you'll notice that there's an account attributes, and you can come in here and click on EBS encryption. You can say, look, I want to always enable EBS encryption. Boom, done. So notice that this only applies to the Stockholm region because you're going to have to go to EC2 settings in every single region and set it, right? So at that point, by the way, you're probably looking at doing it programmatically, just so you know, like using CloudFormation or something like that. But it won't change any existing EBS volumes, right? So this is a region-specific setting. You cannot disable it for individual volumes or whatnot in the thing. When you enable encryption by default, you can only basically do that if it supports EBS encryption. So some volumes don't. And then, of course, that's customer managed keys, which we're not going to talk about. Okay. So let's see. Launch new EBS volumes encrypting using asymmetric master keys. They don't support asymmetric customer master keys, so that doesn't make any sense. Launch new EBS volumes, specify the symmetric key. Yeah, you can. That's manual, and that will not do it automatically, which is what the requirements asked, right? And then this first one, which most of you chose, enable the EBS encryption by default feature. It's a region-specific setting, so you can't actually do it for specific volumes. So that just means you just needed to know that the setting was region-specific. And how would you know that? Probably by either looking at the docs or having actually done it. That's the only way.
Lab.
And there is, yeah, I think there's a lab that does that. So in the well-architected framework under security.
You wrote
Okay.
that question, didn't you?
That's how it goes down? It's like the accusations start flying.
Like,
Oh, that was a really hard question
evil
for us. Did you write that?
scientist.
Sorry, say that again.
I was saying like doing the evil scientist. Mwah. It's tricky,
No,
tricky.
not that one. I've got other more torturous ones. Besides, what's just to say this is that you may laugh at this, all of you, but the exam questions that people have gotten more and more comfortable with cloud have gotten harder and harder over the years. Because I know this may sound weird, but we actually have industry veterans who are in the IT industry outside of AWS write questions. We vet them. Sometimes we write our own questions, but we vet them because we like to pull in an industry perspective. So we pull people from all over, like Etsy, Netflix, startups. Anybody can be part of what they call the SME program. It's a subject matter expert. Just so you know, the trend recently is that questions have gotten harder and harder. So now the psychometricians, who are the people who actually monitor the statistics on all these questions, are constantly asking for, please give us easier questions. stop making these crazy hard questions because we don't need any more crazy hard questions. We need easier questions. So just know that there's a general trend to push the easiness down because the trend has been upwards for a long time. Okay. This one's a doozy. Give you your full 2 minutes here and a little extra from the talking. I think this one's actually in the wrong section, but so take your best guesses here, but I think it's actually supposed to be in data analytics. D, A, B, and D. All right, I got 2 Ds, so I'm gonna go with D. So this one's tough, just so you know, and I'm gonna do the analysis on this one because I think it's supposed to be in data analytics, which I also help shepherd. So we got a bunch of JSON documents, which JSON is just JavaScript object notation, right? And they're being written into an S3 bucket every hour. Well, the problem is that this in turn is being registered in Lake Formation, has a data catalog. So the DA team is using Amazon Athena, which is used, Athena can pull in structured data inside of S3 into tables and then run queries on them. But the queries are taking a long time. And the problem reason it's taking a long time is that JSON is a horrible, like searchable system for like searching for like terms and whatever, because there's no headers, there's no columns. And so it can be typically hard for that to get imported into Athena, which uses Presto, and then make it like structured data. What would be better is if it was CSV. Even better is if it was Parquet, which is they're missing a T here. It's supposed to be with a Parquet, right? And so you transform the JSON data into Parquet, and then you ensure the user basically get data access for lake formation, and that will automatically make it faster. Like we've done performance tests, and I think it's like 1/6 of the speed to execute the same query if you convert it into Parquet. So, which makes me laugh because it makes me think of margarine commercials from when I was a really, really tiny kid. So, but yeah, so that would be the answer. And so this is like, I don't think this would be good for you to, I don't think you would know this because this is a data analytics question. I think John made a mistake and stuck this in here on accident because it should be here, right? Notice, by the way, that Athena supports a bunch, including ORC, which is a real format, not just a fantasy format. And then Parquet, and notice that the T is there. So you can also, by the way, compress it, which is also doesn't really affect things, but makes it a lot cheaper to store. So Parquet, open columnar format. Yeah, all this is data analytics stuff. Pretty sure this is not the right place for this. So we're gonna move on. All right, we're gonna do one more, and then I'm gonna open the floor and we'll be done for the day. So all right, let's do this one. I'm gonna put up the timer for 2 minutes. Let's get it. Wow, you all kind of zeroed in on that on the same time. We got a minute left.
I'll go with B as well.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and take a run then at B. Check it out. All right, it is B. Now, let's see. D. We'll rope you back in. Why did you pick D?
Let's
I saw
see.
your post for D. D, keep going. That's good.
Let's see. I picked it because I know reading some other stuff that dealt with permissions or accounts. It talked about using IAM roles. That's why I picked that one. And I just knew the C and D didn't make sense. So
Good. Sorry, let me stop that. Yeah, so in general rule of thumb is that you don't want your API credentials, like your access key and your secret access key. You don't want them anywhere except on your personal locked down laptop, like your work laptop. And in your home directory on that laptop, only owned and accessible by you. Because they are your particular username and password to get access to the AWS API. So you would definitely wouldn't store that on a shared EC2 instance that other admins could get a hold of, even if you were the only one that had access to the directory. The root user can still get access to it. And then Glacier, you're right, is horrible because it's like, first of all, when you stick stuff in Glacier, it takes anywhere from 3 to 12 hours to get it out, unless you use instant retrieval, which means you're going to pay a premium for that, like 3 cents a gigabyte, 0.03 cents. And then storing the credentials in the root web application directory of the EC2 instance, no, that's also horrible, especially if there's a web server running, because typically then you can retrieve it. So I'm just going to stick with Rajiv's basically perception that like this is a bad idea. These are all bad ideas. Now, that being said, AWS is very much a fan of assigning a role, which is just a security disguise. It's just a set of security permissions that you're putting on top of a service or on top of a user that says that that user now has Superman or, Wonder Woman style permissions and can now, work as Wonder Woman or work as Batman or whatever, but they're not actually Batman or Wonder Woman. They're just like, Diana Prince or Bruce Wayne or whoever it is underneath, right? So, roles are really just security like disguises in a way. They recommend you use roles as much as possible. Do not actually give your application a username and password or a secret and access key. Give it a role. That's the general recommendation. Does that always work? Not always, but 99% of the time you can get away with it. So use a role whenever you can. Or just eliminate that the other answers are horrible security practices. By the way, elimination is a valid way to get to an answer, especially like I had this discussion today, like sometimes they test against command line flags, and I think that's a disaster. We're going to look those things up. And so we're trying to remove them out of the exam a little bit, more aggressively. But if you see that, just use process of elimination to get to the right flag. So, and this, just know that exclusion is also a way to get to an answer. Okay. It's 4:32. Typically by now, it's been like 2.5 hours. Your brains are kind of mushy. But does anyone have any questions? Anything they want to talk about? Anything we need to review other than, the exam guide for step 1, the expertise building with the study guide for step 2, the labs and all that with step 3, and then the practice exams for step 4. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I have a quick one. So when we are going to these dojo tutorials, which one is the most important one? So there's a time mode, review mode, there's a section mode, and or do they all have the same set of questions?
They do not all have the same set of questions. So just to know, like if we go over here to Solutions Architect Associates, the one that I want you to pretty much exclusively focus on is the one that says review mode.
Okay.
Don't use any of the others. You can get away with section based, although they're smaller exams. You can get away with topic based, although they're smaller and service based. But if you want a true representation of the exam, use review mode. You're not using time mode and you're not using the final exam because they won't give you the answer. And I want you to use these practice exams as study exams. So I want you to do review mode until you can get 90% on one, 90% on another, a third if you need it. But that's why I'm asking review mode and review mode only. Section based will also give you the answers, as will topic based. But I would only do that if you keep missing questions on DynamoDB, for example, and you need to strengthen that. Then come in here and do topic based. But for the most part, you need 90% on a review mode exam in order for you to be ready to take the actual exam. So hopefully
Okay.
that's clear.
And when you say 90%, I can take this 3 times, and on one of the times I got 90%. That's good enough.
Yeah, 100%. If you come in here stone cold right now and take one of these practice exams and you get a 90%, then you're ready to take the exam. If you fail, then I recommend that you do the 90% on one, 90% on the second one, and then possibly a 90% on the third before you go take the exam.
Okay.
Understand that when you come here and you just take any one of these randomly and you're able to pass it, that means that out of like 6 times 65 questions, it didn't matter which one you took, you were ready to pass the exam and you'd never seen those questions before. But if you can't pass it, that means I know you're not ready for the exam, which now means you need to go into study mode, not into go take a test mode.
Got it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Not like you personally, but like.
Yeah, I
people.
got the point. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
of course.
Okay, good. Like, why is that Forrester guy always pointing at me?
Uh,
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
I have 2 questions.
Go for it.
First, the recording, I'm assuming will be made available to us afterwards.
Yeah, you know what? Let's fix that right now.
Okay.
I will actually give you the link that the recording is going to go up to. You guys get to see all my sorted YouTube history. Wait, am I even logged into the right user? Give me just one second. Anyway, ask your other question while I pull this up. So I'm gonna give you the link right
Okay,
away.
so my other question, since we knew that the test was changing at the end of August, and I looked at the blog, I said, okay, what happened? What did they change it to? And they said that they had added some more content around data. Let me actually pull this up real quick. And so I
wrote
was
that, by the
wondering
way,
if
so I can
that,
tell you.
oh, good. Well, because I was wondering if that question that you said might have been misplaced was because of the change to the test, but
Oh,
maybe
because
not.
the inclusion of data ingestion. You know what? That's a good point, actually. But actually, you know what? I stand corrected. You're right. You are exactly right, Jennifer. Even I wrote that too. We replaced. I think we moved cost optimization out of one section. We now added data ingestion in, so it's a new domain that's inside of SAA 03, which it wasn't in the old 02 exam. But you're right, there is now a small section on data ingestion. But even with that, I just want to say, testing your ability to know the difference between ORC, Parquet, and CSV files and speeds is not part of the ingestion scope that we originally intended for SAA. So while you're right, there will be ingestion questions, they shouldn't look like that. I think what John did is he just pulled it. He didn't have any ingestion questions because no one's seen the new exam. I think he just pulled it from his DA bank and he pulled it over. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a deeper order level of knowledge than typically you need to know. But now you know. You now know, by the way, that Parquet and ORC files are faster at scanning than CSV and JSON files. So.
Well, I'm just happy I miraculously got that question right out of all the ones I didn't get right today.
Good.
Just process of elimination.
All right, so I created a playlist, which I'm going to stick the video into. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the link to the list so that you already have it. Remember, there are 3 little buttons that are to the right of your chat if you're not using web, if you're using the Zoom application. And there's 3 little buttons you can use that will actually download the chat for you. So it says click and it says save chat. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Don't forget, Michael.Forrester at webhsolutions.com. Also, you could go to Mia Foray at Amazon.com. Both those are in the chat. Even if I don't talk to you like 6 months or a year from now, I still get random emails from students from like 3-4 years ago. So it don't feel like we got to sweet talk each other. If I haven't seen you, like, hey, Michael, do you happen to know what the new exam guide is for 004? Just ask me. As soon as I see your email, I'll usually get back to you and say, hey, here it is. All right. It's okay. But if you want to talk to me, we can also arrange that as well. But otherwise, just follow the steps. Look at the exam guide, get the study guide, go through the expertise building, do some labs, and then do the practice exams. If you are in a crunch and you're like, I really only have a couple hours, like I have 10 hours before I got to take it. I'm going to say this, but it's going to reduce your chances of passing. Just go straight to the practice exams. Just study them to death until you can get that 90%. You'll typically learn a bunch, but you will probably pass the exam. If you do all 4 steps, the probability is really high. So, okay. With that, I don't have anything else. I'll close it down here in just a second unless somebody else has anything.
No, just thank you for your time. This is really great.
All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. I love doing this, actually. That's why I still volunteer to do it for WebAge. Okay. Well, again, you got my contact information, and hopefully we'll see you at the next class, next exam. Take care, everyone.